Mike bought some fried chicken and found that the shop had skimped on the portion. The set meal was supposed to be 12 pieces, but he only got 9. Mike immediately demanded an explanation from the staff. The staff said the chicken pieces were sold out and that they had only charged $9. Mike was immediately upset. $9 wasn't enough to eat. 12 pieces was the standard portion. His wife Lisa tried to convince him to let it go, but the staff member then mocked him, saying, "Does your wife need help with her diet plan?" This remark completely enraged Mike, and shortly after, the fire department received an emergency call. When they arrived at the scene, they found Mike attempting to break into the counter, with his butt stuck like a hamburger patty. The paramedic approached him and asked if he was injured anywhere. Mike replied that the only thing injured was his dignity, and everything else was fine. Mike suddenly spotted the chicken nuggets in the store and became excited again. Mike accused the staff member of being a liar, saying that if he hadn't claimed there were no chicken nuggets left, things wouldn't have escalated to this point. The captain quickly urged him to calm down, warning that he might get injured. They needed to rescue Mike as soon as possible. They applied lubricating oil to Mike's buttocks and tried to pull him out. Mike's bones were almost broken, but he still couldn't get out. Just then, the captain saw a barrel of lard in the store. He dug out a large amount of lard and smeared it on Mike's butt. "That should be slippery enough, right?" They tried again. It seems like the lard really worked. This scene caused the onlookers to burst into laughter. A bystander filmed the entire incident and uploaded it online with the title "The Greased Rescue." His son helplessly remarked that his dad was probably going to be trending again. It turned out that Mike had a temper and often did crazy things. In the end, the firefighters took Mike to the hospital for safety. But now, compared to the physical pain, Mike just wanted to find a hole to crawl into. Mike's temper had made him a laughingstock online. Meanwhile, another bizarre incident caused by emotional outbursts was unfolding in the office. Amy had just finished complaining about her colleague when her tongue suddenly started stretching endlessly, and now she couldn't retract it. Her best friend Lily, who was standing nearby, was terrified. Looking at the almond tea in front of her, she thought Amy was allergic to almonds and asked everyone present if anyone had an adrenaline injection pen. Luckily, someone had one. Lily frantically opened the injection pen and quickly jabbed it into Amy's thigh. But to her despair, Amy's tongue didn't shrink, it grew even larger at a visible speed. As Amy struggled to breathe, Lily finally remembered to call 911. The dispatcher told her that the nearest firefighters would arrive in 3 minutes. While waiting, the dispatcher asked Lily some questions to try to determine the cause of Amy's allergic reaction. Lily said that Amy had stayed up all night working overtime yesterday and then found out this morning that her crush, Jack, had gotten divorced, which made her extremely excited. The dispatcher ruled out an almond allergy after consulting some information and initially suspected hereditary angioedema. This condition causes facial swelling when under extreme stress or emotional distress. However, just as she finished speaking, Amy went into shock due to oxygen deprivation, and her tongue had completely blocked her airway. The dispatcher immediately guided Amy's best friend on how to perform first aid. Jack, who was nearby, also rushed over to help. The dispatcher instructed them to find a straw and a spoon, then have one person use the spoon to press down on the tongue. The other person gently inserted the straw under her tongue, but not all the way, just past the swollen part. Following the dispatcher's instructions, Lily successfully inserted the straw. But Amy still didn't wake up. No matter how much Lily shook her, she showed no response. With no other options, the dispatcher told Jack to step in. The handsome Jack performed his straight guy first aid technique, pinching her cheeks to wake her up. Surprisingly, it worked. Amy woke up instantly. The firefighters arrived shortly after. The paramedic checked Amy's blood pressure and breathing, which were both normal. The rest was left to the doctors to handle. This was a classic case of karma. Amy's tongue finally retracted. But the misunderstanding continued. Not far away, a woman who firmly believed that 5G spreads viruses was raising a crossbow. Martha transformed into a medieval archer and aimed at the workers repairing the signal tower, firing an arrow. The worker was hit in the leg and quickly went into shock from blood loss. Martha did this because she had heard that COVID-19 was spread by 5G signal towers. Soon, firefighters arrived at the scene. They saw the worker hanging from the signal tower and the blood dripping onto the ground. The medic realized the situation was critical and immediately began rescue efforts. He and the captain quickly donned protective gear and climbed to the top of the signal tower. After examining the worker, they discovered his leg was not just a superficial wound but a penetrating injury, as if pierced by an arrow. Just as the two were puzzled, Martha aimed at them again. The sudden attack caught them off guard. But fortunately, they were unharmed. The captain then realized the projectile was not a bullet but an arrow. Before they could recover, a second arrow struck. The team leader immediately ordered his men to locate the shooter. Martha showed no signs of stopping and continued firing wildly. Fortunately, both men dodged the arrows. Meanwhile, ground crew members quickly identified the shooter's location through observation and launched an arrest operation. At that moment, the worker was in critical condition due to severe blood loss. The medic risked being shot to apply a tourniquet to the wound. Little did they know that Martha had already aimed at them again. Just as the situation was about to reach a critical point, a voice suddenly shouted "Stop!" from below. At the same time, several team members broke down the door and quickly subdued Martha. When asked why she attacked the workers, she said, "I was trying to stop the spread of the coronavirus." Martha's obsession was taken away by the police. While in another corner of the city, a boy was caught in an even more absurd situation because of a cinnamon-scented car. Noah had stuffed the toy car into his nostril but was too afraid to go to the hospital, so he hid on the roof. His father had no choice but to call 911. The captain dispatched the team's most handsome member, Jack, to communicate with the boy. Jack climbed up the ladder to the boy's side and found him covering his nose. It turned out he was embarrassed. Jack comforted him, saying, "It's okay. It's just a toy car. I used to stuff Oreos up my nose when I was a kid." The boy relaxed immediately. Jack wanted to laugh at the boy's appearance but managed to hold it in. He was curious about how the toy car had gotten stuck. The boy explained that the tires had a cinnamon scent, which he loved, so he kept sniffing it and eventually shoved it up his nose. Fortunately, the boy's airway wasn't completely blocked. Jack told him to come down with him, but before he could finish, the boy refused, saying that if he came down, his father would take him to the hospital. Jack finally figured out what the problem was. He promised the boy that if he came down with him, he wouldn't take him to the hospital. The boy finally agreed. After they went down, Jack told the boy to imagine the toy car as a big booger and blow it out with all his might. Obviously, this didn't work, so they had to go with plan B, use tweezers to pull it out. The boy asked Jack if it would hurt, and Jack swore it wouldn't. The firefighters behind him heard this and stepped forward to hold the boy's head steady. Jack then used the tweezers to grab the toy car and pulled it out. From the boy's screams, it was clear how much it hurt. Noah ran into his father's arms and scolded Jack, "Why did you lie?" Jack looked embarrassed and could only joke that he was a devil. However, just as they were about to leave, the fire station received another call. It was the boy's father again. The firefighters thought the boy had done it again. When they knocked on the door, they were stunned. It turned out that after the firefighters left, the father had been trying to figure out how such a large toy car could have fit into his son's tiny nostril. The father tried to reverse engineer it but ended up getting stuck himself, like Pinocchio. But who could have imagined that the sequel to this farce would be even more absurd than the original? Just as the father and son's farce came to an end, a cry for help came from the trash can. Someone paid the price of falling for love. Mike just threw away some trash but almost lost his life. It turned out that he and his girlfriend had just broken up. To avoid seeing things that reminded him of her, Mike threw their love tokens into the trash can. Little did he know that his girlfriend Sarah rushed over and said she wanted to keep the gift. Mike stuck his head into the trash can and saw that the bag hadn't fallen down but was stuck in a pizza box. Seeing Sarah's eager expression, Mike decided to retrieve the gift, but accidentally fell into the trash chute. Sarah quickly dialed 911. The firefighters quickly arrived at the scene and found Mike lying on the floor of the garbage compactor on the first floor after falling from the second floor. His body was stuck in the machine, his legs were cut, and his spine might have been injured. He had to be rescued as soon as possible. The property manager said that the compactor started once an hour, and once it started, Mike would be crushed to death. Fortunately, after receiving the news, the property management company cut off the power to the building immediately. However, just as the firefighters were preparing to rescue him, the compactor suddenly started up again. It turned out that the manager had forgotten that there was an emergency power supply in the building. As the machine's inner walls were getting closer and closer to Mike, the captain quickly pressed the emergency stop button. But unfortunately, the button fell off. In this critical moment, the captain told his team to quickly use pry bars to prop up the machine's inner walls. Surprisingly, this tactic worked, and the machine temporarily stopped compressing. Just as they were preparing to pull Mike out, the machine started again and the crowbar was also pushed out. The situation was extremely dangerous, and everyone was at a loss. But just then, the machine suddenly stopped. Everyone was puzzled. but the captain turned around and saw that one of the team members had pulled out the power plug. The captain suddenly realized what had happened, and they successfully rescued Mike and rushed him to the hospital. As they were leaving, Mike took out the broken gift and apologized to Sarah. Just as the firefighters thought their work for the day was finally over, another high-temperature disaster was brewing at the amusement park. Mike and Sarah reconciled, but fate had more tricks up its sleeve. Inside the portable toilet at the amusement park, Tom was experiencing a hot wind nightmare. Tom couldn't hold it in any longer and shoved the half-eaten ice cream into his girlfriend's hands before rushing to the nearest portable toilet. But as soon as he entered, a hot wind suddenly blew in from the sky. His girlfriend Lily's ice cream quickly melted, and the nearby balloons exploded from the heat. The amusement park visitors were instantly drenched in sweat, and Tom, who was using the toilet, was so hot he started taking off his clothes. He wanted to get out of the toilet quickly, but when he opened the door, his palm was burned by the door handle. He didn't know what was happening outside, but the rising temperature made him realize the danger. He screamed for help, but outside, chaos had erupted. The temperature continued to rise, and the wind grew stronger. Suddenly, the entire portable toilet was blown up by the wind and floated straight into the air. Tom experienced the darkest roller coaster ride of his life as he rolled around, covered in feces. When the toilet finally landed, he immediately called 911. He said he was trapped in a portable toilet, but it had been blown away by the wind. He didn't know where he was, and the door lock had melted and couldn't be opened. Suddenly, Tom noticed that the toilet was sinking, and water began to pour in. As the water level rose, Tom panicked. The dispatcher calmed him down and looked up information. Learning that the top of the portable toilet was secured with flathead rivets, he asked Tom if he had a key ring or a coin in his pocket. Tom felt around in his pocket and found a coin. The dispatcher told him to find the rivets and use the coin to loosen them. Surprisingly, it worked, but before Tom could celebrate, he lost his balance and the coin fell into the water. Now there was no hope of self-rescue. The dispatcher could only tell him to hold on and quickly contact the captain on site. Based on the information available, he began to analyze the situation. There were no lakes near the amusement park, and Tom's cell phone location showed that he was still inside the park. There was only one possibility: he had fallen into an area with water attractions. But there were more than 30 water attractions in the amusement park, and it would take a long time to search for them one by one. What should they do? Tom couldn't hold on any longer. Just then, someone shouted that they had found him. The captain rushed over to check. It turned out that the portable toilet had fallen into a large water tank. The captain immediately had someone bring a 3-pronged pry bar and a chain, and they finally rescued Tom. But by then, Tom had stopped breathing. The medical staff quickly performed CPR. After some effort, Tom coughed up a mouthful of foul-smelling water and began breathing again. His girlfriend Lily, completely oblivious to the smell on Tom's body, excitedly gave him a kiss. It seemed as though she was saying that only someone who could tolerate the smell of feces could be her soulmate. However, this action nearly made the firefighters nearby vomit. Tom never imagined that going to the bathroom could almost cost him his life. As for why the hot air appeared, it was actually an extremely rare phenomenon known as a hot blast. Tom's flying toilet became a topic of conversation at the amusement park, while a dog bringing back a severed hand revealed an even darker truth. A dog had brought back a severed hand from outside, terrifying its owner. They immediately called 911. The dispatcher asked them to confirm if the hand was still warm, but Emma, the mother, was too scared to touch it. Her daughter Lily, however, was brave enough to pick it up and feel that it was still warm, indicating that the hand had been severed recently and the owner must be nearby. Following the dispatcher's instructions, the father, John, placed the hand in a plastic bag, wrapped it in a towel, and put it in a cooler filled with ice. Soon, firefighters arrived at the scene. The paramedic examined the severed hand and found that the wound was rough, not like it had been cut off, but possibly blown off. At this point, the homeowner, Emma, mentioned that she had heard fireworks earlier and wondered if it could have been caused by fireworks. However, she didn't know which family had set them off. In order to find the victim as quickly as possible, the firefighters had no choice but to go door to door to ask. But after asking all the residents, everyone's hands were fine. Just then, a strange boy walked over, looking panicked, with one hand hidden in his clothes. Taking advantage of the firefighters' inattention, he picked up the cooler containing the severed hand and ran away. The firefighters immediately gave chase, but the boy panicked and fell to the ground. The firefighters then noticed that the boy had lost a finger. Faced with the firefighters' questions, the boy had no choice but to tell the truth. He said that he had been playing with fireworks with his friends when an accident occurred. His friend's hand was blown off, and he lost a finger. When he heard that his friend's severed hand was with the firefighters, he disregarded his own injuries and wanted to steal the severed hand and rush his friend to the hospital. The team doctor then found the boy's friend in the car. Sure enough, he had lost a hand and was unconscious. The team doctor immediately applied a tourniquet and prepared to give him a blood transfusion. Just then, the boy suddenly woke up and pulled a finger out of his pocket, repeating over and over that he had finally saved his finger. It must be said that these two really are close brothers. The only thing the firefighters couldn't understand was why he didn't call the police. The boy said that his mother was a member of the community committee and was responsible for cracking down on illegal fireworks. He really is a filial son. Just when the firefighters thought that everything was finally over, an even darker crime was coming to light. A Tesla car crashed and burst into flames. The firefighters rushed to the scene and quickly extinguished the fire. But due to the battery, the fire reignited several times. It took a lot of effort for the firefighters to completely extinguish the fire. Strangely, the driver was nowhere to be found. In the backseat was a severely injured man in a coma. The firefighters immediately rushed the man to the hospital. But on the way, paramedic Jack noticed something was wrong. The man's pupils were reacting normally, and there were no signs of a concussion. His respiratory system was functioning normally and had not been affected by smoke or dust. This indicated that the man had already been in a coma before the accident. Soon, paramedic Jack discovered a wound on the man's abdomen. The stitches indicated that he had just undergone a kidney transplant. He was unconscious because the anesthesia had not yet worn off. But which hospital would allow a patient who had just undergone surgery to wander around? Just then, the man woke up. When they arrived at the hospital and Jack was communicating with the hospital staff, the man took the opportunity to knock out the firefighters and escape. Why did he run away? Paramedic Jack then found the police to investigate the man's information. Paramedic Jack said that based on the condition of the wound, the surgery had been performed no more than 3 hours earlier. They investigated all the hospitals near the accident site and found no record of this man among all the patients who had recently undergone kidney transplants. This means that he did not undergo the surgery through official channels, but rather through an underground operation. So the question is, where did he get the kidney? On the other side, the girl woke up to find that one of her kidneys was missing. She told the firefighters that she had met a man named Mike on a dating website. After chatting for a few days, they decided to meet. They agreed to meet at a bar. After taking a sip of her drink, the girl quickly lost consciousness. When she woke up again, she found herself lying in a bathtub filled with ice in a hotel room. It was clear that she had been deceived, and that Mike was part of an organ trafficking ring. But surprisingly, the police didn't believe the girl was a victim and thought she had voluntarily sold her kidney. This was because the police found an envelope containing $1,500 on the bedside table in the hotel room. As a result, the girl faces imprisonment for suspected illegal organ trafficking. This made Grace, the fire department dispatcher, very angry. She believed the girl was definitely a victim, but because of her skin color. Otherwise, this would have been headline news, and the police would have been hunting down the criminals. Grace decided to help her fellow countrymen, even if it meant using herself as bait to catch the criminals. She registered on a dating website under a false identity and waited for the fish to take the bait. At the same time, the police tracked down the man who had fled from the hospital and quickly located his home. Upon entering, they found the man in critical condition, with a high fever and septic shock. It turned out he was experiencing a rejection reaction. The police immediately rushed him to the hospital. After emergency treatment, he finally stabilized. When the man regained consciousness, the police asked him about the origin of his kidneys, but he refused to speak. Illegal organ trafficking carries a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. However, if he revealed information about his suppliers, he risked being hunted down. At this point, the police informed him that the girl whose kidneys had been stolen, the owner of the kidneys now in the man's body, had died earlier that morning from an infected wound. The girl was only 21 years old. The man was shocked upon hearing this, as the upper-level trafficker had told him that the girl had voluntarily sold the kidney for 60,000 yuan. Clearly, she had been deceived. Upon learning the truth, the man felt immense guilt. He immediately provided the police with all the information he knew, stating that the surgery had been performed at a dental clinic. Soon, the police surrounded the clinic. The dentist inside was preparing for another round of transplant surgery. but there was only one patient on the 2 operating tables, indicating that the kidney had not yet arrived. The police immediately arrested the dentist. At the same time, Grace received a message from a man named Mike, who had been the one who had contacted her earlier. He invited her to meet him at a bar in 20 minutes. The fish had finally taken the bait. Grace didn't want to miss this opportunity and decided to take the risk alone. To ensure everything went smoothly, she informed the police of the meeting time and location before leaving. Mike soon arrived at the bar and ordered 2 drinks. He then deliberately spilled his drink, asking Grace to get a tissue, and took the opportunity to slip a pill into her drink before clinking glasses with her. To avoid suspicion, Grace had no choice but to take a sip. Before they could say much, Mike demanded to go to a hotel. Seeing that the police hadn't arrived yet, Grace used the bathroom as an excuse to stall for time. Once inside, she immediately pulled out her phone to call the police, but Mike suddenly walked in. Seeing that there was no way out, Grace warned him that the police were on their way and pulled out her keys for self-defense. But the next second, Mike felt dizzy and collapsed on the ground, unconscious. At the same time, the police finally arrived and quickly handcuffed Mike, but the police couldn't understand why Mike had fainted. It turned out that while Grace was handing him a tissue, she had secretly switched Mike's drink, so Mike had drunk the drugged drink. At this point, one couldn't help but admire Grace's wit and courage. But compared to the organ trafficking conspiracy, the natural disaster that followed was even more shocking. On the other side, in central Texas, the sky suddenly began to rain frogs in a frog bomb pattern. A man was so terrified by the scene that he immediately called 911. Just as he was speaking, a frog fell from the sky, landing directly in the man's mouth and blocking his throat. Firefighters rushed to the scene. The sky was eerily green, and it was raining frogs. The ground was covered with frogs. The firefighters were shocked by the scene. They knew there was a storm, but where did the frogs come from? A female firefighter named Amy guessed that a tornado had swept through a pond and sucked the frogs up. At this point, the entire amusement park was in complete chaos. They couldn't worry about that now. They had to find the man with the frog stuck in his throat and save him first. Just then, the man's daughter, Lily, called out to them, saying that her father was choking to death. The team doctor rushed forward to check on him. He took out a flashlight and saw that there was indeed a frog stuck in his throat. He tried to use a pair of pliers to pull the frog out, but the frog was too slippery and couldn't be held. Even more tragically, the frog slid down further. The firefighters had no choice but to use the Heimlich maneuver. After 2 or 3 attempts, they finally managed to get the cunning frog out. On the other side, the captain noticed that the ticket seller was trapped under a wooden plank. They rushed over to rescue him, but before they could save him, the ticket seller started to repay them by handing the firefighters free tickets. Just then, hail began to fall from the sky, shattering the car windows. To prevent the ticket seller from being injured, the firefighters immediately set up a makeshift protective barrier. He held the ticket seller tightly under his body. Hailstones the size of apples could shatter car windows. Imagine how painful they must have been on a person. But even so, the firefighters didn't flinch for a moment because, in their hearts, saving lives comes before everything else. The fire department's alarm is always on standby for the next unknown crisis.